14 minutes ago, we got a post from Andrew Gower, and he says why the combat professions work the way they do and what we are going to change in response to the feedback. So if you don't know, there's been a bit of drama surrounding the professions and the way that their levels get squished every time you swap into a new episode. I made an entire video kind of breaking this down if you want to go watch that. But today I'm going to break down Andrew's response to this entire combat profession system. Let's go ahead and start off reading this post here. He says, first, I would like to reassure you that your hard work leveling up your professions is definitely not wiped, reset, or made irrelevant when you go to a new episode. I can confirm this. I agree with this, actually. At first, I thought they were made irrelevant, but the further I am digging into the Hope Forest episode, the more I'm realizing that these professions work side by side with each other a lot more than I realized. But let's go ahead and continue here. He says, when you reach episode 2, Hope Forest, 4 new professions are introduced: Scout, Woodcutter, Gatherer, and Carpenter. I'm sure we're all up to this point by now, but then he does go on to say your existing episode 1 professions remain untouched and are still useful anytime you are in Hopeport. I feel like he's missing the problem that people are having here, because when you spend so much time leveling up foraging in Hopeport and then you go into Hope Forest and now you have to level up Gathering, which is essentially the same as foraging, it's kind of like, well, why'd I get to level 20 foraging and now I can't even use my level 20 foraging over here? It's like a punch in the stomach is what it feels like a little bit. Even worse, so the way I was looking at it, that now foraging was useless. It was only going to be useful in Hopeport. It had nothing to do with, but I was wrong. Foraging is still obviously useful, and then Gathering actually ties into alchemy. So the level 0 globe plant that you can harvest inside of Hope Forest actually requires level 14 alchemy to do anything with. So this is kind of where the levels start to intertwine with each other, and I feel like the further along you go in the game, the more we're going to see this, which is why this whole level changing system per episode really does not bother me. But let's go ahead and continue the post here and talk about the reasons for this design. Andrew says that they have designed Brighter Shores to be enjoyable both for players who want to play the game many hours a day and for people who might only be able to play a few minutes a day. This means that in the future, some players will be a much higher level than others. However, when we introduce new episodes, we want them to be fun for everyone. But if there was a single combat profession across the whole game and the monsters in episode 5 start at level 100, for example, then all the players who play a lot would already be a way higher level than that. I can already tell you what he's getting at here, and it is power creep. And I was bringing this up on stream yesterday when we were kind of talking about this, and I feel like the main reason that there's a different combat for each episode is to avoid power creep. The simple fact that everybody's combat essentially gets set to 0 at the start of an episode means that they can develop hundreds of episodes even and never have to worry about power creep. I think that this is going to work out as a design choice in the long term, if the game makes it long term. As a short-term design, it kind of really feels like it's hindering it, but let me know how you guys feel about it down in the comments. He goes on to mention that the way higher level character, if there was a combat across the entire game, would find it way too easy, skipping past a huge chunk of the start of the new episode and not have as much fun as if they were to have their combat squished, is really the only way I can think about phrasing it. He goes on to say that some games try to solve this problem by having a level cap to stop people from being too high of a level, with that cap being increased each update. Then they accelerate all characters up to the level of the latest content. You're talking about, wow, you're buying your level 60 tokens, right? Like, this is a problem in other games, which is technically solved by this level squish, right? As much as people are not happy with it, and I can't blame them for that, this problem of power creep is most definitely solved by this. He then goes on to say, we have gone with what we call the breadth and depth system. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. This has got to be some English terminology going on here. I've never heard of what a breadth is, so we're going to call it width and depth, okay? He says it is relatively easy to progress into each new episode, that being the width. But even when you have reached the latest episode, you are nowhere near finished. There is 500 levels of grinding in each and every skill, meaning that you can at any time choose any of the episodes you have unlocked and continue to level up further in that episode. He mentions that each episode has harder side quests for this purpose, and that these side quests are intended for the players who want to put in more hours and give a further reason to keep leveling up your professions in the earlier episodes. Over time, we plan to add even higher level side quests so that your Hope Port guard level will keep being useful for a long time. The way I've been looking at this game so far is as if I was playing the launch of RuneScape Classic all those years ago when Andrew launched it. There's no way that game launched with more than a handful of quests or a handful of areas or a handful of skills to do. Yet over time, it evolves into a much larger and much larger game until eventually it went from RuneScape Classic into RuneScape 2. I'm not saying this game will ever do that, but I'm saying that this is another ride that I'm definitely along for. Andrew continues to go on and says the episodes are also heavily interlinked so that you will regularly find yourself going back and forth between them. For example, you might use your episode 3 combat to kill some monsters for the potion reagents. You might even take these reagents back to episode 1 to make some potions, which you will then use in episode 4. Once you reach episode 3, you can also start making your own weapons. You can tune for use in any of the episodes 1 through 4, further interlinking the back and forth between the episodes. When it comes to weapon crafting too, if you take a look at some of the items you might have been making in carpentry, trying to grind out 32 for that quest, some of them say that they are used to make weapons, which might actually make the carpentry skill viable and useful for another skill unlocked in the Mine of Mantaban. Overall, I think that the confusion and the disconnect that you feel when going from episode 1 to episode 2 is what made the community react this way. On top of that, I feel like a lot of people are MMO starved and jumped into this game not really understanding what they were signing up for. But let's go ahead and jump into what they are going to be changing. They start off by saying we have already made the first change. They have now changed the level shown next to your character name to be your total level across all professions in all episodes. This is huge. It was super confusing. These numbers made no sense right in the beginning, but now they make much more sense. It's much more of a flex, if you will. But they go on to say that they saw a player suggestion that we could add some special content that relies on multiple combat levels to complete. For example, a boss monster that requires you to both be a high-level guard and a high-level scout. They think that's a great idea and will definitely be looking to add content of this nature in the future. They go on to say they obviously need to better communicate the width and depth system. Not only are people left thinking that once they move on into episode 2, their guard skill becomes forever useless, when it really doesn't, but kind of does. But some people are also trying to complete all of the episode 1 side quests before even starting episode 2 and then finding it way too grindy. This post is a first step towards solving this, but we also need to find a way to better communicate this in the game. I couldn't agree more. They say one thing I plan on doing is showing the difficulty rating on the main quest as well as the side quest, so you can see that carrying on with the main quest first is easier than doing the side quest. Perhaps the episode isn't the clearest word to describe the different sections of the game. You maybe could have changed it to area or zone, he says. Really, I don't think it's going to matter what you call these things. People are going to feel the same way when they jump into the second zone and their combat and skill levels are set back to 0. One thing I would suggest is to make the skills more clearly intertwined. I feel like once you go from episode 2 into episode 3 and now you're making weapons and you're using your carpentry skill, and it makes a lot of sense. Whereas from episode 1 to 2, the only things that's really intertwined is some of the gatherables can be made into potions. More of an emphasis on what you're collecting and how it intertwines with other episodes, I think would be huge. For example, when I'm harvesting these goat horn things, I thought originally that they were going to be for a potion, but it turns out that these are for something to do within episode 3. I don't even have it unlocked yet. But that's what we got from Andrew today. That was his post trying to clear things up and talk about a little bit of the future plans for Brighter Shores. Be sure to let me know down in the comments how you guys feel about this. But that's all I wanted to break down inside of this video. I hope you have an amazing day. I'm out.